Welcome back to Wasteland Engineering. In the previous episodes, we talked about fundamental building basics and how to get the most out of our armor. We will be wrapping up this chapter with some situational but useful building strategies. In this episode, we will be going over how and where to use pass-through parts, how to leverage our cabin as a defensive part, and how to utilize directional armor. We've mentioned parts with the pass-through property several times since the first episode of Wasteland Engineering. However, we have yet to talk about what the pass-through property exactly is, and why these parts are useful. Some parts in Crossout have the pass-through property, as indicated by the unique icon and percentage on their parameters page. The icon itself indicates that this part has the pass-through property, while the percentage shows how much damage resistance it has. While damage resistance is self-explanatory, the pass-through effect works in the following ways. When a pass-through part is hit by a bullet-type weapon, the pass-through part reduces damage taken, and the bullet continues traveling through it, potentially dealing damage to other parts behind it. When a pass-through part is hit by a weapon with splash damage, it reduces damage taken, and nearby connected parts take some residual damage. Because of this, pass-through parts are significantly more durable than they seem, especially for their size. This makes them vital for connecting critical parts, like bumpers and weapons. However, this also means that pass-through parts can't be used as armor effectively. Damage dealt to this part is effectively redirected through it or into surrounding parts. Pass-through parts also cost considerably more power score than similarly sized pieces, making them very inefficient to use in large quantities. The cabin tends to be the most durable part of our vehicle. This is due to how armor works in Crossout. In addition to having its own HP, each armor piece added to our vehicle also increases the durability of the cabin. On a decently armored vehicle, our cabin alone may have upwards of 800 HP. This means that on most builds, the cabin has the highest HP of any single piece on our vehicle. If we think about the cabin in another way, we have a single part that is large, durable, and immune to part detachment. Looking back on previous episodes, these properties make our cabin a very ideal piece of armor. Because of this, we should use our cabin to defend vital parts of our vehicle. We can do this by placing items underneath or behind our cabin. Items underneath our cabin are naturally much harder to hit, whereas items behind our cabin are protected behind the cabin's profile, provided that we are facing the right way during battle. In the previous episode, we talked about the hidden costs of armor. Combined with finding the right armor balance, we can see that there is a limit to how much armor we can place on our build. Despite this limit, we can continue to improve our build by strategically shifting armor into better positions. Rather than have an equal amount of armor on all sides of our vehicle, we can move armor to the sides of our vehicle that are more likely to be attacked. This means that the side of our vehicle that faces the opponent the most should also receive the most armor. For example, let's say that we can only use 4 half walls to defend a generator on our build. If we attempt to evenly cover each side, we can see that our armor is stretched somewhat thin. However, if we move our armor pieces to one side, we are significantly better defended against attacks on that side. Directional armor does have some disadvantages. We are effectively making one side of our build stronger by making other parts of our build weaker. Going back to our previous example, if an opponent was somehow able to attack us from the opposite side, our directional armor becomes useless. Because of this, the usefulness of directional armor depends on our ability to point our armored side in the right direction. If our build has poor mobility, we may want to avoid using this strategy. But if our build can turn very easily, concentrating our armor on one side can be a very effective strategy. In this episode, we went over some situational but useful building strategies. We talked about how and where to use pass-through parts, how to use our cabin as a piece of armor, and how to utilize directional armor. As we end this episode, we want to keep the following guiding questions in mind. When attaching vital parts to our build, if we cannot mount them to our cabin, are we utilizing pass-through parts to keep them connected? Are we taking advantage of our cabin's shape and durability to defend vital parts of our build? If possible, are we concentrating armor to the side of our vehicle that will be facing the opponent the most? That's all for this episode and this chapter of Wasteland Engineering. In the next chapter of Wasteland Engineering, we will be moving away from armor and building strategies and instead be looking at improving our vehicle through the idea of synergistic design. Thank you for watching, and see you out there in the wasteland.